Sorry for being late, guys. It's a bit hectic here. With all this power shortages and internet going up and down. So I was just starting the show, and it appeared the internet is down. I was thinking, well, not again, but I rebooted all the routers, and they started working. So sorry for being late.
Well, I am
I
going to say we are all very glad to see you, not only because it's been a long time since we've seen you, but this means you have power and internet in your house, and that must be very exciting.
That's correct. That's correct. That's uh, in Ukraine right now. The power goes up and down all the time, and well, we have scheduled blackouts. 4 hours we have power, 4 hours we don't have power. But probably the worst thing is not to have or don't have power. The worst thing is to have or not to have internet.
Yes.
Because when we are out of power, then internet providers also stop working, and sometimes the cellular towers also are not working. That's why I'm ready to be in the dark, but sometimes it's impossible to be in the dark without a connection. I
Yes.
have Starlink, which is my backup option internet connection, but then without power, there is no Starlink. So it's either one or another.
Well, this is a whole other conversation, but Elon has a solution for that too. It's called a big battery on the side of your house, but we'll save that for another time. So I guess the first thing I should ask you is just, are things in Kiev, have the number of attacks reduced, or is this just a constant that you're all living with?
They're coming in waves. In waves, there are large scale attacks, and all the times something is coming in. So there are days without attacks, but it's unpredictable.
Mhm.
They're targeting the infrastructure, but sometimes they miss,
Yes.
and they were hitting several of residential buildings recently once again when they were trying to hit something in the center of Kiev. I don't even understand what they were actually targeting at, but they hit residential buildings. But their main objectives these days are it's not even power plants, it's power distribution points. So it's not that they're attacking the generating facilities. They are attacking these nodes of power grid to disrupt the power supply. And they are more. It turns out they are more vulnerable than the power stations themselves.
Hmm. Hmm. This has been going on for weeks now, and how are people sort of accustomed to it and dealing with it? Are people reaching a state of frayed ends, or how would you characterize the mood of people today?
People are just getting angry and angrier. That's as simple as that. If Putin wanted to consolidate Ukrainian society more, he achieved that.
Yeah.
So people are not getting. Probably his bet was that Ukrainians would somehow rebel their own government and would start telling Zelensky, hush down, let's not attack Russians. No, vice versa. People say, give us more weapons, we will go and kill the bastards themselves, ourselves. That's the general attitude. So people are getting more and more angry.
So the last time we talked to you was, I think, in the week leading up to the Congress. And I think it would be very interesting for us to hear you give kind of a short summation of what you think was accomplished there. And then I know there was an executive committee meeting yesterday. It would really be great to hear about what was accomplished there. so we get a sense of the ongoing progress since the Congress itself.
Well, let me start from the Congress. The Congress is the new alternative parliament, uh,
Yes.
and the main achievement, obviously, that it was created, and it started working on several legal acts. It's initiated the process of creating a new constitution, um, and it initiated several other legal acts like the Act on Illustration, which is crucial right now because it's the tool to actually influence the Russian elite. Because this act has a provision if representatives of this regime would switch sides before the certain date, uh, w- they can be relieved of illustration. So it's an encouragement for them to flip as soon as possible so that they can avoid the future problems. But there are numerous other things. We in general we plan to create 18 legal acts, including the draft of the constitution, which covers the basic questions of the society, and these are the legal acts that would be enabled the very next day after Putin is gone. So basically, they shape how the new power, how the new authorities would look like, what they want to do, and where they're planning to go to. And that's obviously what we think is crucial for Russians to understand and for the rest of the world to understand, because this is the question that all the people ask all the time, what's after Putin?
Right.
Uh, so that's one thing. The second thing, obviously, that we strive to demonstrate the alternative legitimacy to the existing Russian authorities, and obviously the legitimacy of the current Putin's parliament and the government and Putin himself is very low, mm, if not negative, because firstly, we all know the quality of the elections these days. Secondly, Putin distorted the constitution recently, 2 years ago, mm, and changed it significantly and illegally. And thirdly, that the current parliament and the president, they were elected with the participation of the occupied territories, which also make them illegal. So for these three reasons, they are not legitimate. On the other hand, deputies that were gathering there at the Congress, they were elected during times when the elections were considered free and fair. Plus, we have several deputies which are still in the office of municipal level. Also, the municipal level in that cases is considered to be free and fair. The federal level is not, but the
Mhm.
municipal level is. And we calculated that altogether, we had in attendance 59 deputies from 32 Russian regions, and they constitute approximately 4 million voters that were voting for them uh, in the past. And 4 million voters, is it a lot or is it a small number? The usual state Duma is being elected with 45 to 50 million votes.
Mhm.
That means that the current set of this Congress has approximately 10% of legitimacy of a normal Russian parliament, uh, which from one hand uh, is not as much as the normal parliament. From another hand, it's a significant portion. So it's a large faction. It would be the second largest faction in the state Duma if we will look at the current outline of the Russian parliament. So it's
In other words, as like as like a party, they would be the second largest party. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes. That is right. So we consider it as a significant legitimacy, not overwhelming, but significant. And I think that this number would grow because there would be more deputies joining the Congress during next convention, and so the legitimacy would grow as well. And about the executive council that Greg, you have mentioned. So the executive council is a kind of an executive body that is created by the Congress so that it can do different tasks in between. And the tasks are like establishing diplomatic relations with other countries, parliaments and governments, and do the certain practical things in between congresses. And that's what we were doing yesterday. So we appointed ambassadors in key countries. We think that we will have several very high profile meetings, not formal recognitions, but nevertheless steps in that direction in Ukraine, Poland, and within Euro Parliament. And that's what we will try to do in the coming weeks.
Is it fair to say that if a country, a Poland or a Ukraine or even the EU meets with you, it's already some level of recognition, not formal recognition that you ultimately want to reach, but the fact that they're willing to have a meeting, does that already signal progress in the direction of getting international support?
That's exactly right. What we wrote in our appeal to the parliaments and the governments of anti-Putin coalition, we consider countries that are participating in Ramstein process as the countries of anti-Putin coalition. We wrote them the suggestion that we understand that they need to interact with Putin and his structures because they de facto control the Russian state. But we suggest them to stop recognizing them as representatives of Russian people
Hmm.
and to establish relationship with Russian people. Let's deal through us those who were elected during normal relations elections, and we want to say that Putin does not have the support of majority of Russians, and let's not paint all Russians with one color because there were Russians who voted for different deputies and for different authorities.
So, talk to us about the story that appeared in the New York Times yesterday. I put a link to it actually in the chat box. People can open it. The title was, "What Will Russia Without Putin Look Like?" Maybe this. The maybe this, frankly, is your Congress, which is pretty exciting to see that kind of recognition in the New York Times. But talk to us about the points that they made in the article that you think uh, are give the greatest legitimacy to the work that you and your fellow delegates that are doing.
Well, indeed, yes, we're thankful for the journalists who recognized what we are doing, and she understood the importance of this process. Uh, mm, mm, for us, obviously, right now, um, um, a lot of problems is coming from the jealousy of other Russian opposition groups, which from the very beginning took us as uh, a new political party, a new political group itself. And we are not like this, we are saying and stressing this all the time that we are not a new political organization. The proto parliament, which is to turn to be the real parliament in the moment of change. Uh, uh, and that's why we are an open platform. So there is no alternative to this platform because those deputies who are ready to do something, they united on this platform.
Yes.
There are simply no other deputies, so uh, they can be added, uh, but we already have the majority of their outstanding deputies. But still, obviously, other people in the opposition, they kind of say like who you are and why you say that you are the parliament if you were elected in the past. And that's the subject that was touched mm, in the New York Times article. But at the end of the day, the bottom line, and I'm very thankful that the journalists recognize this, is that it's as simple as that. There is simply no others,
Yes.
uh, and no others could appear because the deputies, if we in general think about certain legitimacy, which is not coming from the number of Twitter followers or the viewers on YouTube. The only other legitimacy is through legitimate elections,
Yes.
and that's what we have, and that's why we are starting drafting a legislation, not discussing, it's good or bad, to shape future like this or like that, which is nothing because the government makes a certain formalized decisions, and these decisions need put on paper. Otherwise, they are not decisions; they are dreams.
Yes.
And to my mind, a lot of people in the opposition, firstly, most people in so-called non-system opposition, they just never were in the skin of a government official or even in the skin of an elected deputy, and they just don't know how to actually write a decision, how to write a legal act, how to design a law, uh, how to make a government order. It's just technical knowledge. It's nothing special about it, but it has to be done. And it has to be done in the very first day after the change.
Yes.
So somebody needs to be doing this. And there is a great distance between what you write in the book, better this or better that, and the formalized document on how these ideas are being implemented. And Greg, what we have wrote together with you in our book, Does Putin Have to Die? Uh, I'm glad that many of the ideas that we wrote in that book, the Congress actually recognized and
Mm.
started shaping into the actual legal acts.
Well, you're kind to give me credit, but it was your work with a little massaging from me. But I'm thrilled that the Congress is able to use it. I mean, obviously, that was the whole point of creating the work, was to alter the future of Russia for better, for a democratic Russia. So I have a couple of questions for you. One is, you've talked now about this moment of change. I don't understand how that happens. I mean, and in the book, you were, I think, found a very clever way to address this question, because there's an FAQ, the last chapter, and one of the questions in the FAQ is, what happens the day after, and the day after, and the week after? And I think I can almost quote your response, which was, it won't happen the way we've planned, but there is a plan. Are you able to, in some way, express to us, Putin's gone, and in that moment of change, here's how this becomes the new constitution and this group becomes the new leaders? Is there some way of explaining that, even taking into account that there's a lot of factors we don't understand today?
Yeah, there are two very separate things. One thing is about the mechanism of Putin's removal,
Mhm.
and another thing is how to institute new circles of power.
Yeah.
Uh, so, in terms of Putin's removal, my belief is that it comes through an armed process, an armed protest, and that's what we are doing. And again, nobody else is doing what we are doing in terms of putting up the armed resistance within Russia and the armed resistance outside Russia in terms of the military units which are right now fighting with alongside with the Ukrainian army
Yes.
against the invaders, and that's I believe would be the key levers of change. If the situation would follow the different path, and it would be mm, more I don't know, palace coup, some treason within the elites and whatever. If that would be a positive change, I believe that my friend and colleague Mikhail Khodorkovsky uh, would be able to influence it significantly because that's what he is focused on and working on. I do believe that the initiative would be anyway with the people and with the revolt from below, but it would be driven from the top. I think we still would have the common approach. And in both situations, we are coming to the work that the Congress is doing, uh, which is shaping these laws, and then we just announcing this as a new parliament the very next day, and start enabling the legislation as official decrees.
So part of what I imagine the job of the Congress is today, in addition to creating documents like a new constitution, is getting the Russian people to know that this Congress exists and that this constitution is being formed so that they're not hearing about it that day, but have already begun to be aligned with it.
Uh, no, I would say yes and no. First of all, I would stress that the constitutional process, to my mind, has to be way more democratic than something that has been written by a certain Congress.
Mhm.
I think that the constitution has to be a fruit of a crowdsourcing process with all the citizens of the country.
Mhm.
More like the constitution of Iceland was created not so long time ago. And what the Congress is doing is drafting the seed text
Mm.
of the Constitution, which would be put up there for discussion and amendments and changes, and then it has to be adopted on nationwide referendum, and nothing else should work. That's why the transitional period is inevitably take some time.
Okay.
Uh, mm, and I believe that the transitional period should be maybe 2.5 years, during which all this would happen. Because, like, first year discussion and adoption of the constitution, the second year formation of the political parties and the political system according to that constitution, with the nationwide elections at the end of this year. Um, so I think that's the only way how that can technically happen. But the certain laws which are coming more or less within the framework of the existing constitution and the existing legal system, but they are canceling the most notorious acts that Putin's government have adopted over recent years. That's what we need to do. These transitional laws and the new parliament, the permanent parliament, the parliament which would be elected under the new constitution, would have to either support those decisions or revise them. But on the transitional period, you need to have something, because some of the most bad and undemocratic decisions that Putin was making, they need to be cancelled right away. The illustration needs to happen right away. The peace needs to be established right away. And these all are legal decisions which need to happen in the very first day.
So I'm guessing that a military force is very important in this whole equation.
Yes.
And how does that work?
With rifles and machine guns.
All right. Well, I mean, so whoever steps into power in that moment of change needs to have the military behind them, correct?
Absolutely, no other way. Look at what's happening in Russia
Yes.
today with Mr. Prigozhin and with Mr. Kadyrov and with all others. There right now dozens of military and paramilitary formations in Russia that were created recently during this war, and which all would compete for power. And uh, uh, I do believe that the law enforcement would actually disappear in the moment of change. That's what they were doing in the past. So I think they are very dangerous, and we need to pay a lot of attention to them at this very moment when they are still in power and they feel strong. But in the moment of change, they tend to vanish usually.
Hmm.
And I think that what would happen. But the vacuum would be filled with a lot of different bad guys, uh, which needs to be dealt with. And if you don't have a significant military force behind you, it would be impossible. But I don't think that would be a deficit of this. Firstly, we have already formed the Russian nationals formations inside the Ukrainian military. Second, there are so many Ukrainians who volunteer to help us, at the moment of change. So I think that we'll have enough and enough experienced people.
Mhm. Mhm. So that's also another thing that sets you apart from these other opposition leaders is I don't think any of them actually have the might to take control of a government, whereas you're describing that you do.
I think so. Yeah. Uh, I think that the uh, major bets of the existing opposition leaders um, is more with elite changes
Mhm.
rather than grassroots process. Um, Navalny, just because he's in jail, he needs just to wait, and he is waiting for something to happen and for him being released from the prison. There is zero hope that Putin would do this. Um, mm, Khodorkovsky is making the bet on the upper circles, uh, and mainly he associates the potential for the change with the regional governors of Russia, which I agree with him would be probably the most promising force. I believe that many of them would flip again at the moment of change, but I don't think they would be the driving force for the change.
Yes.
Kasparov is associating himself and working with the immigration. And his bet is that somehow things in Russia would change and then he will return back home with a lot of talented people that fled Russia, and they would take part in the formation of the new government. But obviously, I don't think that those who would actually do the change
Mm.
just give away power for somebody who did not participate in the change. I think
Yeah.
that, whoever is coming back, they are more than welcome to participate in the elections when they would happen. And that's fantastic, but, you cannot make your claims for power if you are not part of the revolutionary force. No, and who's left?
Well, so I do want to ask, and it's interesting. The last time we saw you before the Congress, you brought up this idea that there was competition within the opposition for leadership. And ever since then, I've been waiting to talk to you about this and teasing it with our audience. So I'm glad we're talking about it now. I guess my last question for you is this. Do you see that you and these other opposition leaders will at some point come together and begin to work as a team? Or do you think there's too much distance between some or all of them and that just can't happen?
Look, with Khodorkovsky, we're good friends,
Mhm.
and I don't see much of a contradiction there. I think that with Khodorkovsky, it's almost 100% certainty that in the Endspiel, we would work together. Uh, n- but probably not before, because again, Khodorkovsky's bet is with the elites, and mine is with the revolution. And for both of us, it's counterproductive to publicly confuse those two strategies together.
Mhm.
Uh, mm, but again, personally, we are very friendly.
Yes.
Uh, mm, with the rest, as I say, Navalny, his group was criticizing me a lot and very fiercely. Uh, uh, in many senses unfair, but it doesn't really matter because he's not part of the change. He's in jail. We
Yes.
will, no matter what his people are saying, we will do our best to liberate him, and we will liberate him, obviously, as all other political prisoners. That's our objective. Uh,
Yes.
but at the same time, he's not part of the change. He will start doing something after the change, and
Yes.
it's our objective to let him do
Of course.
stuff after the change. But he is not part of the change. And with Kasparov, I think that he's a smart guy, but I believe that his strategy is right now outright counterproductive because he's calling all Russians to leave Russia, and I want Russians to stay in Russia because I want and I need people who would be actually the part of the change. And he wants them to create a virtual Russia when I need real Russia.
Yes.
But again, despite the differences at the moment, um, mm, um, again, because he is focused on immigration and I am focused on doing things inside the country, those strategies they don't collide. I mean, like we are working
Yes.
in different directions, and I don't see much of cooperation during the change, uh, and mainly people who are around Kasparov, these are those people who are afraid of being part of the change.
Mhm.
Uh, that's why they left. Otherwise, they would have stayed and fought for the changes. But nothing restricts them to come back after the change would happen and compete for the power. Let them do it. I would be very glad if that.
I'm going to ask you one last question, and then I want to just have you address Anna's question in the chat box. But as I'm listening to you, and then this is something I've been thinking about a lot over the last month or two, is are these competing opposition leaders, you and the other three we've talked about, is this in some way analogous to, for instance, in the US, the primaries for the presidency? Kamala Harris attacks Joe Biden while they're running against each other, but then she ends up as vice president because at the end of the day, they have similarly aligned goals and can find ways to work together. Is there an analogy there at all? Or am I over westernizing it?
You are over westernizing it. Uh, but I would say that in my personal mind, it's more like what you have said. I mean, say, because I'm, again, for everybody to understand, and that's written in my book, I am against preserving the position of the president. Uh,
Yes.
I am for the collective leadership, for the parliamentary republic, etc., etc., etc. But said that, if we are imagining that the figure of an ultimate leader still exists, um, for the sake of explanation of what I mean, I would definitely invite Kasparov and Navalny to become members of the team and to form a coalition.
Yes.
Uh, they will not. Don't understand sentence.
You're saying they would not invite you.
Yeah, they both are unilateral leaders who take discussion very personally
Mhm.
because I like discussion. I think that it's very good to debate, and the truth is being generated in these debates. And I am genuinely for the parliamentary procedure, which creates a compromise. but they are not. For them, if somebody criticizing their ideas, it means that he is a personal enemy. So
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. Well, that's a pretty serious difference between you and them. Do you want to take a shot at answering Anna's question in the chat box before I let you go?
Yeah, and the answer is very simple. Patriarch Kirill and most of the leaders of the current church would go under restrictions because it would be disclosed that they are KGB officers. And that's why I don't think that is a problem.
Hmm.
The problem, the problem would be for the church to find clean people who can actually replace them.
All right. Well, Ilya, I want to thank you for being here. I know I speak for everybody. We're thrilled to see you with the lights on. We know you're
And
thrilled.
guys, I'm really sorry that I was neglecting our meetings in the past, but that's not me. Really. I already several times made promises to Greg that I'm joining, and then boom, the power off, or boom, the internet off, and I cannot connect. So
Yes.
when there is no light, even even cell connection is not working. So
Yes.
sorry for this.
There's no need to apologize. We know you would have been here if you could have been here.
The grid company is promising that it would get better in the coming days, but as we understand, they fixing problems, but new missiles are flying in, so no guarantees that
Yeah.
that it will be fixed. But I really hope so.
Yeah.
Right now, it's actually if it would not be restored and be reliable enough, I think we may return to what we had previously, because in the daytime, in the office, we have triple reservation of power sources, and that's why our TV channel is working. We have the 3 providers for internet and 3 providers for power. That's why the light is on, and at home is not like this.
That makes perfect sense. Well, thank you for talking with us today. I'm glad you were able to stay a good bit of time. Obviously, we had lots of questions. Thank you for answering them. And fingers crossed that we will see you tomorrow with the lights on and the internet working. Selfishly, we look for it. Yeah, but we look for it for your sake as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Take care.
All right. I'm going to let you go, Ilya.